So the 1990's called, and they want their CX playbook back. So the first thing I need everyone to say is, Sean, I love you. That really? Sean, I love you. Just remember that. As we go through, hopefully we can. I want to talk to you first to set the stage about this concept called radical relationships. Because if you know anything about me, you know I'm all about radical relationships. So to have radical relationships, you must have honesty, integrity, trust, and loyalty. You're like, what does that have to do with CX? I'll tell you here in a minute. Next, this is my definition of radical relationships. Bust down the traditional walls of human interaction and do a cannonball into the messiness that comes with it. So how many of you guys in your organizations work with humans? If you don't have your hand up, we need to have a talk or some alcohol, one of the two today. So, or both, right? So I want to share with you a little bit about my journey. And people say, why do you share all this, Sean? There's a real reason. I'm in my, I think, 5th career in life. So my first career, hopefully this will, you see that guy sitting at the piano bench? Yeah, that's me. So I studied music in college and have a bachelor's degree in jazz, piano study, and vocal. And I traveled professionally for years, and that got really boring for me. And then I went to my next logical company. How many of you know this company? How many of you have studied this company and what they do in experience? How many of you attended one of the events that this company puts on? Okay, I was very honored. Spent 7 years for the Walt Disney Company, and 2 years into that journey became a Walt Disney Imagineer. Any big Disney fans in here? Who knows what Walt Disney Imagineering is? So Walt Disney Imagineering is the group within Walt Disney that builds every resort, every ride, every theme park, every movie. And there's been about 1,900 of those in the history of Disney. And it's a complete honor to be there. I left the company 10 years ago. I still have 5 more years left on my non-disclosure agreement. So I can disclose some things. I can't disclose some things still at this point. 15-year non-disclosure agreement. Then I went to this company. That's right. How many of you know of Humana? I know one particular here in the room does, Dan. I got recruited out of Walt Disney to go to Humana. And it's when Humana wanted to shift from being known as an insurance company into a wellness company and really focus on member experience. And I was part of a team that was really powerful there within the organization. Still don't know that the company completely made the shift. They wanted to do a lot of talk about it and did a lot of investment in it, but still to this day, they have done some great things. And then I made my next logical career move, so you can see all this is logical. Musician, to Disney, to healthcare. Anyone know what this symbol is? There should be 3 gentlemen in the room that might know. What is that symbol? It's the Xavier Musketeers. So I left healthcare to go into higher education. And Stephanie, I think maybe out of the room, so this is good. And I know I have a friend here that's a professor. I'm not made for higher ed. I was there for 16 months, and I'll give you a really quick career piece of advice. Know who's in the audience when you're speaking. So I was in my first week at Xavier, and we had a assembly, faculty assembly, But if you know anything about traditional higher ed, you have faculty who sits on one side of the room, and then the peons who sit on the other side of the room. That's the staff and administration people that these people don't want anything to do with. And in particular at Xavier, 80% sat on this side of the room, 20% sat on this side of the room. And at the time, the assistant dean of the business school stood up and said, and there was a Q&A for me, said, Sean, what would you do, in her way of trying to patronize me, to innovate higher education? And I was hired to be the chief innovation officer, the first one in the country for a higher ed university. And without thinking that thought through, I just said I would do away with tenure. "80% of the room had tenure. Us peons did not." So I lasted about 16 months in that career and decided that that was not the thing for me to do. Do I still believe, and I still speak at education conferences continually, because I still believe higher education is the next bubble that's going to bust, and I still believe we need to do away with tenure. My philosophy doesn't change on that. So, and then there's these 3 pictures, one of which she was here helping today hand out name tags. Kayla is my 13-year-old, almost 14-year-old who thinks she's 40. Don't know if you guys had any of those girls that are like that. And she's still in it. Hey, I would say this to her anyways because she knows it. And you will also see we have this fascination with cruising because all 3 of these pictures were taken on a cruise and with a particular cruise line, Disney Cruise Line. Any Star Wars fans? You need to do a Star Wars cruise. So that is the right picture of my wife and I on the Star Wars cruise. Yes, she is in full costume. And she's going in 4 weeks to stay at the new hotel at Disney and go through the experience. And the top picture is my wife Carla, Kayla, and our son Colby. And then the bottom one was our first cruise after 3 years of a pandemic this past February back at Disney. And all that is going to lead into the story of what I really want to talk about today. I want to teach you something. I know there's some people here from Blue Cross Blue Shield, so if you want to do shots later, we can do that. Who knows what I have in this right now anyway, so. And I want to share a pretty personal journey with this and why it's so important to me. What does this date mean? Tax day. Well, on April 15th of this year, that day changed for me from tax day to this day. You have cancer. 49-year-old male who had not gone in to get his colonoscopy when he should have at 45. Studies are showing now, men in the room, if you have not had a colonoscopy and you're 40 and older, go get one. And they told me that my children needed to start getting colonoscopies at 35 because colon cancer is on the rise, and particularly in men. I went in for a traditional colonoscopy. The doctor said to me, when you come out of anesthesia, if you come out well, we'll have a conversation with you. If you're groggy, we'll bring your wife in or have a conversation with her. I do really well with anesthesia. I know it. I woke up. I'm right awake. I'm like, let's talk. He walks into the room and he says, I think we need to bring your wife into the room with you. Remember, I worked for Humana. And I own a company called Mophie that we have spent about 80% of our business is in healthcare. In particular, if you know anything about Walmart and what Walmart has done over the past few years in the healthcare space, I'm bringing something to life called Walmart Health, which is 10,000 square foot facilities that has complete integrated care, cash-based, no insurance. We were the design team that brought that to life. And so I know what this meant. They bring my wife in, she looks at me, sits down, the doctor comes in and says, Sean, during the colonoscopy, we found a mass in your left side. We're gonna biopsy it, do all of that, but I can tell you in my 20 years of experience that you have cancer. I know it well enough. So, I guess I went back there. On Friday, May the 13th, I went and had surgery done. Had a 6 centimeter by 3 centimeter mass removed from the lower left side of my colon, and 28 lymph nodes that they were going to biopsy. And this Friday, June 10th, I start my first round of chemotherapy. I will leave here tomorrow morning. Thursday morning, they will put a port in my chest, and I will live with that port for 6 months and go through 12 treatments because they found cancer in my lymph nodes as well at that point. And people are like, why are you traveling? Why are you doing this? Because this is a story that first off needs to be told. First off, for men, because we don't want to talk about this shit, but we need to talk about it. And secondly, experience is human. And that's what I've loved about everything this morning. Experience is about the human. And that was what I learned when I was at Disney. And so that's when the journey began for me, is when I was working at Disney. What I didn't tell you in my career path, because I waited to this moment, is I then went back and got a degree in finance and a master's in finance. And the whole time I worked at Disney, I worked in finance. If you're a musician, you understand music is numbers, and I was a prodigy. So I was accepted to Juilliard, Berkeley, all of the major schools of music. It just came very natural to me. So numbers comes very natural to me. So I went into finance. I didn't want to perform when I was at Disney. And how many of you work in an organization where you want to strangle your finance people? Right? Or your legal people or your compliance people. Those of you that work at Blue Cross Blue Shield, yes, again, that's the second shot we will do today, is for those people. I learned how to understand experience from a finance point of view. And every decision I made when I worked at Disney, I kept a 4-year-old princess and a 4-year-old pirate in my mind as I was having to make decisions. And it changed the way I looked at experience. What you have not heard me say to this point today, and there's a real reason around this, is I think as an industry, we have shot ourselves in the foot. I don't talk about customer experience. I don't talk about employee experience or digital experience. I talk about experience. And as an industry, if we don't change our vernacular, we are going to be done away with. And so when I say that the 1990s wants their playbook back, organizations are more than org charts, strategy documents, mission statements. They're living, breathing ecosystems filled with people, touch points, and systems. And I heard you just say beforehand, 17 different silos in a product organization, right? You see this picture? It says, our silo mentality may be getting out of hand. And it's a moat with alligators around it. How many of you work in an organization that have silos and don't want to talk, right? So let me propose something to you today. And last week, I spent with another dear friend of mine. His name is Zach Hamilton, who is living with cancer as well, and recorded a 6-episode mini podcast series that will release in July around the transformation from the 1990s experience management mentality to experience systems. What does that mean? 1990s, insights and signals. And I hate to be the pain in the room because I know there are people in here that have Director of Insights or VP of Insights. But that's a 1990s mentality way within an org to look at it. We are benchmark obsessed. Study organizations, study what they're doing, right? Minimal action. We talk about a lot. How many of you have a lot of data at your disposal, but do nothing with it? Outdated frameworks, email surveys. Really? Do you not understand that email surveys still look in the rearview mirror of someone's experience? And here's a prime example for me. Told you about the journey. Within Cincinnati, we have a health system called Mercy. All of my care had been within Mercy until I was diagnosed that I had to go see an oncologist, because Mercy doesn't employ oncologists. So I had to go into another system, or into a private system, and I got asked all the same effing questions that I had been asked. And I actually got on the phone and said to the practice manager, you're either going to love me or you're going to hate me after these 6 months. I said, I don't understand why you went out and built your own electronic health record system when there's big ones out there that could take all of my data and move it over there and ask me the same questions. I said, I was just diagnosed with cancer. And I spent a lot of time in healthcare, you guys. I put a review board together within 48 hours with the chief medical officer from Cleveland Clinic, Susan G. Komen, Movember, breast cancer research, and I sit on a board for a pediatric oncology group. And I sat down with my oncologist and said, I want to know what your plan is, and then I'll have 72 hours to run up my review board, and they'll tell me if we're going to go forward with that plan or not. He didn't really like me. I don't think he still really likes me at this point. But we have got to change this framework of how, and healthcare is the most broken, I think. And then this, NPS CSAT. Let's ask someone, would you recommend a friend or family to an organization? I got sent this after my first visit with my oncology. Hell no, I'm not going to recommend. I don't want any friend, family, and even worse, enemy to walk into that place. Why would you send me that to get a net promoter score? Very much still the check the box mentality. Some of you may work in that organization. Experience systems, we've got to figure out how to do channel of choice for consumers. We have to have deeper customer connections, which is why I started with radical relationships. We must have organization-wide actions. Remember, I told you I have a finance background. You don't do innovation, you don't do experience just to check the box. If it doesn't ultimately affect your top line or bottom line, get rid of that department. Think about that. Actions. Quantified business impact. You have to have a business impact. And yeah, there's not a degree out there, and I've been very fortunate. I was one of the first people when Disney partnered with Stanford to go through the Stanford D School. So I'm trained in human-centered design, otherwise known because they had to dumb it down for business people, called design thinking. I don't ever call it that. It's human-centered design. It's a theory. It's a scientific process. What that process doesn't teach is this: how to quantify business impact and teach. So we at Mophie, we took human-centered design and added a sixth step to it, where I teach people how to build pitch decks and talk to a CFO and want to hear the things that they want to do. Experience-led innovation. And Dan Genghis, who you'll hear this afternoon, he and I both worked for Humana. I had this aha about 3 years into Humana. We had a COE, Center of Excellence for Customer Experience. We had an innovation team. And one day, we were sitting in a meeting with one of our executives, and people were reporting out in those two areas, and they were reporting out on the same type of project. Do you know how many frickin' millions of dollars was wasted? Lead your innovation from an experience standpoint. I'm gonna try to get through all this. And then it has to be culturally embedded. Why does Disney do what they do? It's their culture. You either do it or you don't. You work at Chick-fil-A, you either do their culture, you don't, right? Harley Davidson, Home Depot, there's tons of them. It's a culturally embedded thing. And the reason is for people like us. It's the human experience. So, we have to put the heart back in business. Have to. You've got to put the heart back into business. And as experienced professionals, you have to figure out how to do that. If you get the human experience right, you will get the numbers you need. You don't have to worry about doing CSATs or NPS or those. Get the human experience right. You'll get the numbers you need. And data needs to be the validation to the human experience. Don't lead with data. And there's a big controversy about that in our industry. I am a firm believer, lead with the human experience, use data to validate that experience. So, real fast, this thing called the experience ecosystem. This is what Disney does. They just don't talk about it this way. We designed this at Mophie. It's the web of people, touch points, and systems that combine to define the experiences of the people in the ecosystem. To leverage experience as your competitive advantage, one that increases engagement, loyalty, and revenue year after year, but it requires aligning, engaging, and humanizing the entire system. Here's a very quick sample, if you go to our website, of what we put as an ecosystem. When we work with organizations, we actually help them define their ecosystem. Because it looks different if you're in healthcare, or if you're a museum, or if you're a retail company. When people are involved, things get messy, right? There's no perfection in people. I ask my wife all the time if I'm perfect, and you can only imagine what she says to me. It's time to rethink our approach, reimagine our relationships, redesign our experiences, and put humans in the middle of everything we do. And quit checking the box, people. Like, we gotta get past that and that 1990s mentality of checking it, because the result will be this: a stronger organization whose people are able to make a profitable, sustainable impact on the world. And I don't know about you, the one thing the pandemic has taught me is that I want to make an impact. So here's a little graph that I want you to take as some homework with your organization. High trust, low trust. I love, Stephanie, you started with transactional or experiential. We say transactional or relational, right? Consumers are purpose-driven now, not task-driven. That's what the pandemic has showed us more than anything. So when you think about that graph right there, think about where your organization is, and where do you think you want your organization to be? Right? It doesn't always have to be way up there on high trust and high relations, but I would say every organization needs to figure out how to get in that quadrant. I don't think the DMV is going to be a real high trust, high relational, but God, could we just teach people to have nice conversations at the DMV? Right? So, again, sent that the wrong way. Consumers are purpose-driven, not task-driven. Here's how you can connect with me. Do all kinds of things. We do an Experience Friday live show on LinkedIn. If you're not scared to do a 20-minute conversation live on LinkedIn, find me today. We will get you scheduled. Dan's been on it. There's been a couple other people in the room. It's just a real laid-back conversation where we talk about the good, bad, and the ugly of what happens. I'm going to do it this Friday, sitting in an infusion suite with cords all over me, with my business partner, who is not here today. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff. It's an honor for me, actually, to have a gentleman in the room today. His name is Corey Warfield. He's sitting back here. Corey is one of the leading influencers in LinkedIn, has about 500,000 followers. And he has transformed how I look at LinkedIn and engage and build those types of radical relationships. And then mentioned, we'll be doing a podcast around this whole experience management to experience systems. That'll come out in July. Just find me. I have a business card that has a QR code on it. I don't carry papers. You don't need more shit to take home. But you can take my business card, scan, and get what you need. And thank you for being here today and being part of this and being part of my life.